Christopher Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Fantastic. So it's a point on the board, and it's the warm-up episode 115. It's Brady and Tom. It's the Norwich City preview. Tom, how you doing? I'm going to mix it up and jump in there first. Tom, how are you?
It caught me off guard there, Brady. I'm not bad, mate. How are you doing? We've got a lovely guest this evening, haven't we?
We do have a lovely guest. I'm good, Tom. Good to hear you're good. And our lovely guest is indeed the second tier's Justin Peach. Justin, welcome to the show. Your first one of this season. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, really good. It's been an interesting start to the championship, and there's been a torrent of abuse as to be expected, but none from Huddersfield fans. So it's a big smile from me today.
Well, you know, we've got 45, probably 50 minutes here. We'll just give it a plan. Justin's wondering what he's in for, but don't worry, it's not that bad. But we will just hold on. We're going home to the John Smith Stadium, that is, because Huddersfield are hosting Norwich City this Saturday. It's the Terriers versus the Canaries, Neil Warnock versus David Wagner, and they've got players called Gunn and Sargent. So, Tom, could this be a bit of a battle? Yeah, thank you very much. The Canaries have certainly taken off this season, as Norwich are unbeaten in all competitions with 3 wins and a draw. And that draw was a 4-4 humdinger away to Southampton, and that was their only away match so far this season. So can we expect something similar? Justin, impressive start from Norwich. Is there anything to make from their start to the season? Because I know you weren't too hot on them.
Yeah, well, we predicted them to finish 19th, and mainly because we weren't particularly confident with David Wagner. I think if we consider that his spells in previous clubs has been pretty poor, if we're being honest, pretty poor at Young Boys, at Schalke, since obviously leaving Huddersfield. And then obviously going into last season with Norwich, again, really, really poor. Really sackable form, if we're being honest. We weren't particularly hot, and the signings have been industrial. They've been industrial, which is fine, but we just felt Norwich needed a little bit more quality. But the start to the season has been terrific. They surprised us incredibly, by an incredible amount, and they are one of the teams to beat so far this season because, as I say, they've been fantastic.
Yeah, Tom, hearing that, does that scare you ahead of Saturday?
No, not really. I feel like this is going to be my soundbite of the season because Warnock's in charge. I feel like Warnock had Wagner's number every game we played against Warnock whenever we faced him under when we had David. So I think there's a little bit of kind of hope there for me because I can't remember. I mean, we never beat Cardiff. We didn't beat Cardiff in the Prem, did we? We got battered by him at the end of the season. We went up, and then I can't remember. I don't think we lost away. Well, Billings scored that, didn't he? But so I just think, yeah, it's one of those. That's my little hope going into Saturday, I guess. And they've got a very good team, but I've seen kind of a lot of their fans questioning whether there's any depth there as well. So it's kind of one of those if you kind of hoping maybe that you're getting off there and they don't really have anyone to kind of come off and impact or anything like that.
Yeah, he's hoping. I mean, Justin, how do you feel about this Norwich team from a town perspective? Then you mentioned how they've started well and their signings have been industrial, but do you see any weaknesses in the team that we can look to exploit?
Yeah, there are certainly weaknesses. If you're looking at Jack Stacey, for example, being a wing back, an adventurous wing back, he's going to get up that flank quite often. So Neil Warnock's going to see that and think, well, if we leave a wide player in an advanced area on that right hand side, there's space to exploit on the counter, and it might well occupy Jack Stacey and restrict him going forwards into that final third area where he can cause a lot of damage. I think. Again, they're very good at turning possession over. And I think the way Huddersfield will set up, bearing in mind I did think this about Millwall, I thought Millwall would be defensively incredibly resolute and make it really difficult for Norwich because Norwich have been really good on the counter-attack so far this season. They've had a fair share of possession, but they're really good at turning possession over quickly in that final third. And it's quite striking how quickly they can get into dangerous areas. So that there are obvious strengths, but with that, if Huddersfield defend as deep as a Neil Warnock team can do, it's going to restrict that space. We know that Warnock can mix the game up as well. You can play it long and play the percentages, which might well play against Norwich because they played against Hull, who like to play it on the ground. They played against Southampton, who like to play it on the ground, and they've obviously played against Millwall, who were just completely hopeless at the weekend. So. Yeah, there are obvious weaknesses there, and I think they're particularly in the way that Huddersfield might set up. It could really exploit or ask a lot of questions about Norwich and make it really uncomfortable, which again could fall in Huddersfield's favour.
There you go, tactics for Saturday. Get it forward, get it launched in air. I like it. But Tom, did you see that? I think the fictional ball rolled out for a corner there, so that can mean only one thing. What does it mean, Tom?
It's time for History Corner. Have we got a jingle for this yet, Brady? Have I just made one up on the
We
spot?
do. I had it in afterwards, so don't worry, mate. Panic
All right.
not.
I'm obviously listening to the podcast after it's
Yeah, good for you to say that.
So interestingly, I mean, last week we had a team that we'd played over 100 times. This week we've not even played Norwich over 50 times. We have only played Norwich 47 times in a competitive fixture. Norwich currently pipping it. We've won 13, drawn 18 and lost 16. First ever meeting was as recently as 1960, Brady, where Town lost 2-0 away. And then it took Town 2 years to get their first win. And that was another 2-1 win, another win away, game away. 2-1 win in the same division 2 at the time. During the 60s, Town only lost 3 games in 20 meetings, winning on 7. But since the 70s, Town have only won 6 times against Norwich, losing 13 of those meetings. Unfortunately, those goals in this fixture came only 2 years ago, that beautiful night away during COVID. So thankfully, at least there wasn't any fans in the ground to witness it. I don't think, was there, or was it just that horrible? I just ignored it anyway. But
I think it's
a 7-0 loss. I feel like there wasn't anyone there. Was the people there yet? I don't know. But it was the 7-0 defeat under Carlos 2 years ago at Carrow Road. Number of players have played for both, obviously all very recently. I mean, Jordan Rhodes again pops up. That's 2 weeks in a row now. Jordan Rhodes. Pilkington left Town to go to Norwich. Absolutely gutted about that at the time. His kind of famous moment for Norwich as well was scoring the winner in that 1-0 win against Manchester United in the Premier League. Grant Holt made over 150 appearances for Norwich and was loaned out to Town in 2014. Do you have any favourite Grant Holt memories for Town, Brady?
No, I don't. All I remember is obviously, didn't he become a wrestler after he retired?
Yeah, he did.
I remember.
And I was that his celebration? Because I feel like when he came to Town, he was closing the end and he was really showing off these wrestling moves that he had. Or maybe that was just him falling over all the time on the pitch. It looked like a wrestling move. Ewan Roberts, your lookalike, pops up again, Brady. So after Town, Norwich are the team that he's played for the most. And then it's Town to over 250 games for Norwich and 84 goals. Quite a good return, that, innit? James Vaughan, we signed him from Norwich. He only made 5 appearances for them. Jacob Butterfield only made 2 appearances for Norwich, but he sneaks onto the list there. And then the furthest back one I could find when I gave up and I couldn't be bothered anymore was David Phillips, who played for both teams in the 90s. Don't know if you can think of any others that I've missed off the list.
I don't know. Yeah, Pilk's the one that springs to mind. I remember watching when he scored that winner against Man U. I remember being like, I can't remember how old I was, but I remember being like really proud because he'd played for Town, which says a lot. Probably says a lot about our fortunes. Yeah, I don't know. Am I missing anyone obvious, Tom? I think you covered.
I mean, that's all I've got. Oh, Denel Sinani. Sorry.
Of course. How can we forget?
Do you know he played more games for us? So he played nearly twice as many games for us as he did for Norwich, and he were only on loan for us for a season.
I think that probably tells you about the quality of the he was all right, I don't know. I'd have him back, to be fair. I know he didn't do much at Wigan. Tom, the question everyone wants to know, the listeners, is has Alan Lee scored against them?
For Huddersfield Town, do you know what? I forgot to look that up this week. But I'm gonna say no, because I think I'm pretty good with my Alan Lee knowledge, and I don't think he ever scored against Norwich for Town. He probably has scored against Norwich.
He is former Ipswich, so
yeah. He must have popped up in a derby at some point, Justin, mustn't it? Actually, didn't he play for Norwich as well?
Alan Lee? Tom, I thought Alan Lee was your mastermind subject. You've got to be telling me and the listeners.
He did play for Norwich. There you go. That was the trick question. I was waiting for you to say, what about Alan Lee, Tom? And Alan Lee, add that one on the end, Brady. Cut and paste. Alan Lee also played for Norwich.
Yeah. The thing is, as well, you could have did he score an own goal, because technically it counts. But yeah, no, very smooth. But we'll come back to Norwich and players they did or didn't play for, players that play for currently. Justin, we talked about their weaknesses, but what are Norwich's strengths? What are Town fans need to be worried about?
Well, Jonathan Rowe's been in incredible form this season. He's a young player who's come through the ranks. He's having a breakout season so far. I think he's the first player since Timo Pukki, although that wasn't long ago, to score in his first 4 games of the season, which is an incredible feat. And his goals are well taken as well, going to his goal against Millwall. Really tidy footwork and a lovely, delicate finish. He scored a screamer as well. I think it was against QPR in the League Cup. Or it might have been the game of the weekend before that. But he's been on fire. He's been on form, and he's going to be a real danger. And obviously, David Wagner has got a system in place that is causing a lot of damage. Gabriel Sara, other than Kieran Dewsbury, has probably been the best midfielder in the division so far. I saw Canary Cast, they put out a stat. I think he's created 16 chances so far in the league this season. We've played 3 games, which is just astonishing levels of creativity. So there are 2 players there going forward that are going to be a real sticky point. I've mentioned Jack Stacey and his ability to get forward as well. So yeah, they've been in fine form. Josh Sargent, obviously he scored a header against Millwall, which is good for him because he needs to get in goal scoring form. And Ashley Barnes is an absolute nuisance for any team, isn't he? Because he runs and he kicks, and I don't think he bites, but I wouldn't put it past him to at least think about it.
Yeah, he kissed a player, didn't he? Famously, I can't remember. So another player we were rumoured. Well, I don't know how strong, but I think maybe it was just a case of Town fans would have him, even though he would never come to Huddersfield, unfortunately. Tom, obviously the main talking point, I suppose, for neutrals around this is David Wagner coming back. I know he came back last season, although it was a weird game, really, because we were rubbish, and let's be honest, many people didn't go. How are you feeling about that one? Because I'm going on Saturday, and it will be the first time I've seen him properly in the opposition dugout. So, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you look at all the backroom staff now and everything. It's almost identical now to the setup that they had that got him promoted with Town, which is a bit. That's getting me a bit more. There's no loyalty in football, is there, Brady? So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I think I'm starting to listen to Lee Morris a lot more on Twitter when he says managers go. I think someone just tweeted about it. Oh, what are you gonna? Oh, it might be natural to our question about David Wagner. Maybe I'll bring it up in a bit. But Lee's, I think it was like shock horror. Manager goes to another team or something like that. It's like, yeah, I guess so, Lee. That's kind of right. But it's going to be interesting at Bueller and the gang and everyone there. So I worry just a bit about Clem kind of being there now, and if he's going to know how to get past Lee Nichols, obviously it's going to be shared, isn't it, in the dressing room? So
yeah, I do agree with it. I suppose it's Yeah, it's always going to happen. I think it's just like you say. I mean, it's basically a town. The backroom staff is just like a town greatest hits, isn't it? You got a goalkeeping coach. You got Chicho, who was there last season, who's there now.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's just it's just Huddersfield Central. So yeah, I'm sure it'd be the same if we had the players that Norwich wanted. But it will be weird seeing Wagner. But I think it's funny, isn't it? Because I feel like I get quite defensive about David Wagner. I remember when I spoke last season about to a journalist who covers Norwich, and I was just like, I want him to do well at Norwich because I feel like he's not had the best track record after he's left Huddersfield, and I think Schalke. I mean, we've touched on this, but that club was a basket case, and he did very well at the first start of the season, and then like found protests and stuff because of the board, and it kind of all unravelled. Young Boys, he didn't do as bad as people said. I realise I'm quite biased, but I would like Norwich to do quite well just for David's sake, really, because I do think he's a good manager and he's a bit underrated, I think. But yeah. Anyway, Tom, we will go and hear from Norwich fans and see what they think of David Wagner, because it's time for the fan phone in. So very carefully, because before we started recording, we had a little slip. Who did you speak to?
I spoke to Adam from Pinken. It's like a podcast fanzine about Norwich. Very interesting stuff on their site if you want to check it out. But yeah, here's the call I had with Adam.
Hi Adam, thanks for joining us.
Hello Huddersfield Town fans, Adam Harvey here from the Pink, and Tom's kindly invited me on to give some thoughts on Norwich City ahead of our clash at the John Smiths on Saturday.
Right, first up, what positives can you take from last season?
What positives do I take from last season? Yeah, I'm scraping the barrel a bit for these ones. It was a really difficult season for everyone connected with the football club. I mean, coming down from the Premier League, of course, the expectation is that you'll be in and around the top six. Dean Smith got sacked around the January time when we were sort of heading down towards mid-table. We, of course, brought in a man that I'm sure Huddersfield fans know well, David Wagner, and he got it sort of going a little bit for a period of time, and then towards the end of the season, just one win in 11, and it was very grim, a toxic place going to Carrow Road. The fans were sort of turning against our sporting director, Stuart Webber, which is also a man I'm sure Huddersfield fans know. And it wasn't a nice place to be. I'd say the one or two positives probably are Gabriel Sara, who we brought in from Brazil, who second half of last season really was a shining light in a pretty dire team. It was a team that was really lacking energy and sort of creativity, but he was the one constant who I think probably got Norwich fans off their seat, and he started this season in similar fashion, and he's a man I'm hoping we'll keep hold of before the end of the transfer window. And I'd say probably David Wagner's arrival, as much as it didn't really pan out for him in the second half of last season, we're slowly starting to see sort of the fruits, I suppose, of him now finally having a team that's kind of his team. He's almost laid a little bit of a stamp on it, and I think we're now starting to see the benefits of that.
Yeah, well, as everyone will have heard in this podcast, we know a lot about David, and we obviously absolutely adore him at Huddersfield. So, having said all that just then about last season, what are you looking forward to most about this season coming?
I think it's probably almost the fact we've got no real expectations on us. We're quite free in that we're not now the Leicesters or the Southamptons or the Leeds where they've come down from the Premier League. There's an expectation they're gonna go straight back up. We've not really spent any money. We've just bought one player for a fee this whole summer transfer window so far, and that was Christian Fasnacht. But of course we've made more money than that because we've sold the likes of Max Aarons and the likes of Milot Rashica, which for sort of big fees. So there's no expectation. So I think in some ways that often bodes well for Norwich. The season under Daniel Farker in 2018-19 when we won the title, that was the year that most sort of Championship fans or pundits were sort of putting Norwich in the mid-table bracket, and we ended up going on to win the title, and it was such a brilliant season, arguably the best of my Norwich City supporting years. So yeah, I think that's probably what I'd say. Gabriel Sara is the other positive, I think. He's just an unbelievable player who is far too good for the Championship, and I think he's Premier League bound, whether that be with Norwich City at the end of the season or a move via a transfer, because he's a seriously talented player. So they're probably the two positives I'd say that I'm looking forward to this season.
So then, who is your favourite Norwich player this season coming and why?
Favourite player and why? I've mentioned him a few times, Gabriel Sara, but I think I'm going to go with Johnny Rowe. He's got 4 goals in 4 games already this season. A 20-year-old winger who's come through our academy, been with the club sort of since, I think, the age of 10. He's had a really rough upbringing, a really difficult upbringing, which I think now to see him in the first team as a shining light it's just been brilliant. A man who made his debut actually in the Premier League for us a couple of years back, but last season was kind of stifled a bit for him because he just suffered injuries and never really made any first team appearances, a few off the bench here and there, but nothing to sort of tangibly show the quality that he's got. And hopefully for us, he can maintain the form he's showing at the moment, because he's a man who's just playing with freedom. Every single time he gets the ball, the Norwich fans get off their seats. There's an excitement, a buzz around him, and that's quite beautiful to watch. So I think he's the man that I'm looking at, and if he can continue this goal threat, then I think Norwich could potentially be pushing for top 6.
So what are your thoughts on Sir David's start to the season?
3 wins, 1 draw if you include all competitions. And the draw away at Southampton were a 4-4 thriller. And that was a game that, as much as the draw was probably the fair result, it was actually a couple of poor refereeing decisions that cost us that day. So there's an argument to say that he probably should have 4 wins out of 4, which is quite miraculous when you consider at the end of last season, 1 win in 11, and the fans turning against the sort of the players and the hierarchy at the football club, the ownership. And it now feels like we've kind of got that united feel back, which I'd imagine lots of Huddersfield fans felt under David Wagner in that sort of successful season you had in the Championship all those years ago. It just feels a really different place. The mood around the football club, the fan base, is really drastically different from last season. And I think, he's now, you can see the benefits of him having a full transfer window, a full pre-season. The players look fitter, the mentality, the hunger, the desire, the passion is back. I think the fans are now starting to buy into the playing style a little bit, because that was something that was heavily criticised at the start of last season when Wagner arrived, or midway through last season when he arrived. A lot of Norwich fans kind of got so used to Daniel Farke's kind of high possession, high sort of press football, which, I mean, obviously Wagner's got elements of that, but the possession element probably less so. And we looked like a side that didn't really, or wasn't capable of scoring goals, or maybe trying to be more defensively resolute, which obviously is often a successful tool to get out the Championship, but it's not something that I think is a Norwich brand of football. But sort of as the start of the season's shown, we now look like a squad that can score goals for fun. I mean, 3 goals against Millwall, 4 away at Southampton, 2 against Hull. It's quite drastically different, and I think David Wagner deserves a lot of credit.
Who's your favourite signing this summer?
I think it's probably a man who's yet to play, actually. He got injured in pre-season. Borja Sainz, he's a young Spanish winger, 22 years of age. We brought him in from Turkey. He had a clause in his contract with Garanaspor that meant Norwich could pick him up on a free after they got relegated. And he scored, I think it was double figures in goals last year in the Super League in Turkey. And he looks like a really seriously talented player. I'm really excited to see him pull on the Norwich City shirt for the first time in a competitive fixture, because everything about him just, I think, is sort of embodies what Norwich players are supposed to be: exciting, get bums off seats. And he probably fits the bill. There's a few, I suppose, household names that we've brought in, the likes of Ashley Barnes, Shane Duffy, Jack Stacey, which maybe to the outside eye don't really sort of, I suppose, pull any attention, but they've all been absolutely superb so far. I think Ashley Barnes, his character around the group, you can see it rubbing off on young players, and I think for that you've got to say that the transfer business, which has often been a criticism, I'd say, of recent years, has been absolutely spot on.
And what's your expectations of your first full season of David Wagner football?
Expectations for the season? I mean, I wouldn't really say there are any. I think it's very much, I've seen Championship sort of predictions that put Norwich in the top 6. Some putting us down as low as like 20th. But personally, I think we've got to be challenging for the top 6. I think if we can keep hold of Gabriel Sara before the end of the window, Johnny Rowe continues his form, Josh Sargent can get double figures. He's already got 2 goals so far this season. I see no reason why Norwich can't be challenging. I think the home form is crucial. That was the biggest issue for us last season, and 2 wins out of 2 so far at Carrow Road. And if you can back that up with, points on the road, which I think under David Wagner, that's probably been the one thing we have seen so far throughout his reign at Norwich, is he's very good at getting results on the road. So it's all looking positive. I'm quietly confident that we might be in the top 6. Of course, lots of can change, a couple of injuries or a bad patch of form and things can dip. But at the moment, while the mood's high, I'd say most fans are optimistically hopeful we'll be in the top 6.
And finally, what's your score prediction for Saturday?
Score prediction for Saturday. Huddersfield obviously has been a difficult start to the season for you guys. Just 1 point on the board. I'm a big fan of Neil Warnock. I think he's a great character, and I think he's someone who's been linked with the Norwich job at different points throughout his managerial career. Never materialised. But I think given the form we're in at the moment, it's really difficult to predict anything but a Norwich win. I think the way we're playing, the confidence in the group, I struggle to see that sort of capitulating, I suppose, on Saturday. But of course, it's the Championship and anything can happen. And I'm certainly not underplaying Huddersfield and what a similar or difficult test it will be, which I think we saw probably last season at the fixture at the John Smiths in the 1-1 draw, where as much as we were very good on the night, at times, we got punished for one poor mistake, and that can, that's what I suppose what can happen when you're playing good teams in the Championship. So I'm going to go 2-0 Norwich. 2-0 Norwich. I think we're yet to keep a clean sheet in the league, and I think this is probably the game. If David Wagner can get it set up right, I could see us going and picking up all 3 points, and who knows, that might even be enough to take us top of the league by Saturday evening. So fingers crossed. Looking forward to a good game. I suppose that rounds off. Thanks for inviting me on the channel, and hopefully you've all enjoyed my opinions.
Brady, lovely stuff.
Lovely stuff indeed, Tom. And well done for getting it right under the pressure of the recording button. Very impressed. I feel like they're just trying to trip you up with that, though, shortly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we will come on to another section because we talked a little bit about David quite a bit. It's time for Corner's question. So, obviously, it's Norwich. It's a lovely German man in the opposition dugout. So we want to know, what is your favourite Huddersfield Town David Wagner memory that isn't the playoff final? Because, come on, we know, playoff final, best moment. But come on, let's be creative. This one came up a lot, so I'm just gonna get out here. But Andy Kay buzzed in first, if you like, with this. He was like, the removal of the hat and the theatrical bow to the South Stand after beating the self-proclaimed biggest club in the world. Wonder who's talking about that. Absolute pinch me, is this real moment? We've got quite a few about that, and I'll come on to you guys and see what your favourite moments were. Lee Morris talked about him earlier. He's getting a lot of shout-outs in this podcast. He said it was quite nice when he came back last season and got an ovation on the pitch at half-time, emotional even. Yeah, it was. I was at that game. That was nice, actually, particularly how he left. It wasn't great. Joseph Ward says his post-match interview after the Cardiff game at the John Smith Stadium, where Neil Warnock knocked on his door and told him to hurry up. Brilliant. Warnock at his best. Yep, absolutely. That was a classic one. Did he say, "I'll tell you to beat Wednesday"? I think that's what he said.
Yeah, he did.
Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it did help him. But yeah, Tom, what's your favourite David Wagner memory at Huddersfield?
I'm just staring at a photo of him now in a Norwich shirt. It's like, don't know, I'm just feeling really sad about it. I just enjoyed everything with him. He was just such a nice man, wasn't he? Like, that time when he came in, it's just actually incredible how quickly the whole club got behind the idea of it. Like, everything kind of cliche like fell into place, didn't it? And it was just brilliant. I've never felt so united as a Town fan base and with the players and everything. So favorite moment, man, I think I was at the Chelsea away game where we stayed up, and just the scenes after that were just absolutely brilliant. And every Wagner wave, as it got coined, was probably one of my favourite things to be part of, I think. Brady, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. It's not letting me. There we go.
Alright.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. Successful there. But yeah, no, that was a really nice moment. I remember watching that game, and my stepdad was watching it at his, and we're just on the phone to each other as that Chelsea game's getting announced, and we're just like, can't believe it. Like, just, it got higher and higher the more the. But yeah, no, it was incredible. My favourite, this is just basically so I can show off, but I think this touches on how nice a bloke he was. I actually met him in Huddersfield train station. See, I'm getting emotional just talking about it now. I met him in Huddersfield train station before our home game against Liverpool. And I was like, obviously, there's a lot made about him and Klopp and their friends. And I was like, oh, is he meeting Jurgen sneakily before they play? And I got a picture of him and just spoke to him for a couple of minutes. And it was just really nice. Like, you could tell he was like, oh, I kind of don't want to be seen, but he was still giving, in case it alerts other people, but he was still making the time for me. And yeah, he was just a really nice bloke. And like, I don't know, it's just, I always feel like I never normally ask for like pictures with people, but it was just like he made me feel like okay to ask, which I think just kind of tells you about the bloke. Justin, what about yourself? I realise you're not a Town fan, but what's your favourite memory of Wagner when he was out here?
Yeah, I can certainly fill in here. It was the lead sprint down the touchline. Was it Helix scored the winner in 90?
Yeah.
Helix, Heffler. Heffler scoring the winner, and then just the pandemonium that ensued. Wagner sprinting down the touchline, and then the afters, the scenes that we're told that we don't want to see, but we all really want to see it, especially in a derby, especially as a neutral as well. When I don't think much happened in that game by way of creative quality of the typical derby, if I can remember it rightly. And then obviously that happening was a nice sort of raise of the heartbeat for a neutral. And then, yeah, the nice guy Wagner turning into the villain somewhat, although Gary Monk probably took it the wrong way, a bit too much, maybe a bit too sensitive. But yeah, that was an interesting moment.
Yeah, that was good. The thing is, as well, again, getting defensive here, Monk goes for the barge there, and that's why.
Yeah, Monk instigates the barge, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, and wasn't Wagner banned for a couple of games? Touchline banned, wasn't he, for that?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was full of great stuff, that game. It was we got It's a Fucking Dream from that game. Heffler with his interview at the end, swearing on Sky. You had Gary. What was Gary Monk's little phrase? It was like the guy from what is it? Oh my God! What Come Down With Me, innit? You lack grace and decorum.
Right.
He sounded like the guy at the end of Come Down With Me, speaking to David Wagner at the end of that. I can't remember exactly what Gary Monk's words were, but they were quite funny. What a brilliant derby it was.
Yeah, that was great. I think that's like peak. When we talk about the highs, I feel like that was right up there. But we might have a chance to make our own highs. Neil Warnock, former team at Ellen Road, coming up soon. So who knows? But yeah, we are approaching half time here on the podcast. So if, like me, you nip down to the concourse on a match day, maybe head down a little bit sooner if the result's not going Town's way. Get to the bar, get yourself a refreshment. Obviously, there's the Magic Rock Bar at Huddersfield Town. But if you're not going to the game on Saturday, or got a little bit of time between now and the game, why don't you head to magicrockbrewing.com, enter our code AHTTC10 in your checkout, and you'll get 10% off all online orders. So get it used. That works on anything, beers, merch, etc. There you go. Right, okay, we're going to come back, and when we do, we'll talk about Huddersfield Town. Okay, we're back. We've changed halves. We're focusing on Huddersfield. Let's get to it. So before the podcast started, we obviously we had a new signing. Woo! We signed someone finally. Please bring some more. Delzano Borgzerg made his debut at the weekend against Middlesbrough. And so I was very conscious about how to say that. Ahead of the show, we wanted to know, are you happy with the loan signing? A resounding 83.8% said yes, 1.5% said no, and 14.6% said they were concerned by his stats. Tom, what do you think about the new man? Because we did see him at the weekend, half an hour or so. But did you like what you saw?
I mean, I don't think it was enough, but I'm getting kind of para vibes a little bit from him. I think he doesn't look worried to run at people, which I quite like. Weirdly, like Karoma and Sorba are quick players, but then they very rarely seem to run at a defender and try to take them on. So I kind of think he's something that we are lacking. I mean, we kind of got Diarra doing that in the middle, but he seems to be. You're going to put him more out wide, aren't you, when you're bringing him on? I think at the moment. So yeah, there's positives there. He could be quite a useful player. I think the bits I did see from kind of the highlight reel of what he's got. I mean, it's always going to show the little best bits that they've got, but when you see that, there's obviously something in there. Do you know what I mean? There's strength on the ball there. There's him beating players in really kind of close, confined spaces of the pitch. So, yeah, I don't think it's a terrible one, but it's something that is a nice addition, but it's not desperately what we need, I don't think. I mean, we've been saying it every week, as in the midfield position might be a bit more important at the moment.
I mean, Nagel said he'd sign Ings, so hopefully we see a little bit more. And I think Neil's kind of made it clear we need additions. But yeah, I think it's hard to judge in half an hour, like you say. But I think the interesting thing was, and we saw it on social last week. Sheridan Sparks spoke to us about him and his time at Mines, and it was on the pod just gone reviewing the Middlesbrough game. He had a couple of discipline issues there, but I think if there's any player who's like struggling to find their feet and wants to feel, loved a bit, I think Neil Warnock's the right type of player and manager. Sorry to get that out of the players. Management skills are impeccable. We saw what he did with Karoma last season. Someone who, I think Josh Karoma has a lot to, as well as working hard himself. I think he can thank Neil Warnock a lot for getting him that deal, really. I don't think that would have happened without him. So, yeah, no, it's interesting. I think it's just need options, don't we, Tom? And like we said it to death on here. It's great to have the youngsters, and we've got some exciting youngsters. Diarra, I thought had a good game against Middlesbrough, looked impressive in spells, but it's just I suppose it's better to have people who've played a bit more and got a bit more experience to help out the team. So a welcome addition. Justin, I'm not going to ask you to tell us, for 5 minutes about this player, because let's be honest, none of us knew anything about him before he signed for Town. But I was just going to ask you, obviously you guys on the second tier predicted us to narrowly avoid relegation to finish 21st. Have you seen anything from the signings we've made or how we've played so far that changes your mind, or do you think we're in for a bit of a struggle?
It's a weird one with Huddersfield, because looking at the games in isolation, you've been in every game you've played so far. If you go back to the Leicester game, you were undone by a late goal, some individual skill by Mavididi, and then a mistake by Lee Nichols, which doesn't happen very often. The Plymouth game, you probably should have come away with a draw based on the chances in areas you got into. And then the Middlesbrough game, you're undone by a wonder goal from Hayden Hackney. So there are really fine margins in the games at the moment. And that's the disappointing thing. And that's why it might be a struggle for the season. But if you add a little bit of quality into that team, then I do think Huddersfield can finish higher than 21st, because what I'm seeing at the moment, I know we're only 3 games in, but there are teams probably in a worse state than Huddersfield, which is quite weird saying that based on the summer business so far. But Huddersfield, with the new ownership, with the new structure behind the scenes, or newish structure behind the scenes, and Neil Warnock at the helm, are probably on a slightly upwards trajectory than the likes of Sheffield Wednesday, QPR. I mean, Cardiff is still struggling. Trying to think of other teams. Rotherham do not have enough quality in their side either, and they're not. I don't think they'll have the budget that Huddersfield do, although it might be closer than we might think. So there are clubs in worse states than Huddersfield at the moment, and the squad's only going to improve. I think that's the key thing. The squad's only going to get better. Etienne Kamara left. That was a blow, but he lost his place towards the end of last season, and players are only going to come in, you'd expect. So I don't think it will be as much of a struggle it was last season, although it did look more comfortable. But I do also think it's going to be a case of let's not get too hasty if there's a good run of form, because, as I say, the lack of quality has been quite prevalent in the last 3 games because he played relatively well, but just not had that quality to turn the draw into a win, turn his losses into a draw.
Mm. And sorry to probably put you on the spot here, so apologies, but what type of players do you think Huddersfield need? I mean, obviously we have our own thoughts, but I'm just interested to. I know you don't cover us in, as great detail. It's not like you could watch every single game in great detail. I mean, let's be honest, like some of us don't. But what do you think Huddersfield needs looking from out of it? You talked about that quality. It doesn't have to be a particular player, but just interested to see what you think from a neutral's perspective.
I think I'll jump straight into the defence. I think the defence is fine. You've got Matty Pearson and Michael Healy, who are fantastic players at championship level, and then Tom Lees, who's a steady performer. Josh Ruffles had good spells last season. And Sorba Thomas, if he plays right wing back, has got a lot of quality on the ball. So there's plenty of ability if Warnock opts for a back 3. Central midfield is a key area. I don't think Jonathan Hogg is the man, shall we say, just because he's 34, suffered a fair few injury problems in the last couple of years, and it needs refreshing in the centre of the park. I'll disagree with Bergzorg. I know his goal record isn't great. Having looked at it, it can be better, but Cardiff got promoted under Neil Warnock with Callum Patterson as a top scorer. He scored 10 league goals, started 24 games that season, played right back, right mid, centre forward, and centre mid as well. So Neil Warnock teams don't necessarily need a prolific striker. They're expensive. He recognises that. As long as the goals are shared and chances are being created throughout the team, Huddersfield will be fine. So I do think if you just get 2 additions in the centre midfield, maybe a creative option, a bit like Hungbo, you need someone who's got that ability to change the game very quickly. And I think Hungbo brought that. I don't think you've replaced him quite yet. There's a lot of tenacity, a lot of energy in the team at the moment. But players like that add that little bit of zest, a little bit of quality that makes a lemon cake, if that makes sense.
Lovely finish there. Do like a lemon cake as well. Yeah, no, really good point. Tom, I don't disagree. It's a shame. I know we haven't really talked about it, but I was gutted to see Hungbo leave Watford on a permanent to Nuremberg. Was it Nuremberg he went? I just feel like I think he did enough for us to be in there, really.
Yeah, weird one. It's one of those where you kind of follow up and say, do you find lining them back out to us this season? Because, it's a shame, innit? But I think Justin's spot on there. If you've got someone else in like Hungbo who just adds that bit more, then I think we're going to be all right. I mean, I've watched every game and thought, do you know what? Doing all right here. He's got the one thing I'm not worried about at the moment is when a team is on the attack against us. Like a couple of seasons ago, any time the team picked the ball up in our own half, I'd be blooming shitting myself, basically. It's like I'm just relaxed. Like he's got it set up. It's so much more structured. It's a bit more relaxing. It's just ironing out that classic ironing out those little mistakes. It's really interesting, right? The fixtures, how fixtures can really get your season going, because when you look at who we've got, it is a very difficult start we've had. And it's just like you're saying, Justin, you're picking a few teams out there like Cardiff, QPR, Sheff Wednesday. It's just a shame we've not got kind of someone like that in this first kind of 5 games. We've just seemed to be dealt a really a tough hand, I think. So I just hope that doesn't kind of bite us in the ass. Gone really American there, and bite us in the ass, and we can't. And like, you know what I mean? It gets in their heads, and they think that if we don't pick up this first win in this next 2 kind of thing, I just hope it doesn't really get on the back of the players.
Yeah, no, we'll see. It's clearly been influenced by Kevin Tom.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah. Cool. So, specifically this game then on Saturday, Justin, how do you rate Town's chances heading into this one? I know Norwich have been on fire, but as Tom touched on there, we have been in games. Do you think Town will be in this one, or do you think Norwich will have too much quality for us and blow us away?
It's really hard to say because obviously didn't particularly rate Norwich before the season, but they've overachieved based on our expectations. But we know how difficult it is to sustain form, and Southampton were the team that sort of derailed it a little bit, but that was a bit of a tennis match and a bit of a go between, which sort of played into Norwich's hands, because the more open the game is, I think the more likely Norwich are going to get into that final third and get into spaces that are going to hurt opposition. We saw it with Millwall, and we saw it in parts with Hull as well, who were not quite ready for the game, or maybe taken by surprise by Norwich's approach to the press. I think Neil Warnock will set the team up and make it really awkward for David Wagner and his Norwich side. I think they'll play deep, or I hope they'll play deep, and I hope they'll play long and play the percentages and make it a scrappy fixture, because it's one of those where if the game's scrappy and the technical players like Gabriel Sara don't get into it, the more it's going to play in Huddersfield's hands. And I think they've got a lot more about them than they did last season, because you'd expect them to have a similar approach to the game against Burnley, for example, last season, but they ended up getting panned. Don't think Norwich are anywhere near that level. So I think it'd be an ugly game and a difficult watch. Probably not selling the fixture for you guys, but I think that's the best way of getting a result against this Norwich side, who are just flying. You eliminate those technical players like Sara and Sargent and Jack Stacey, and go man for man and make it horrible and kick and do all the Neil Warnock things that need to be done. I think, I'd quite fancy a Matty Pearson 1-0 set piece, because Huddersfield, based on their performances, deserve an ugly win, because they played well, not got anything yet so far this season. So don't play particularly well, get a scrappy goal, take the clean sheet, 1-0, and take it into the next game.
I would certainly like that, Tom. That sounds like music to my ears. And do you think? I know you're like, I'm not worried because we've got Neil Warnock. I'm guessing you're not worried on Saturday, but are you feeling like Town could get a positive too?
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's going to be a right battle in it. I do really like that Sargent. I think him and Barnes are like Sargent. I know he looks like not Ralph Wiggum, Flanders kid. What's he called?
Todd.
Todd, Rod and Todd. But he proper gets about. He gets his elbows in people's faces. He's got about him. I do really like that about him. I think it's kind of, he's going to learn a lot from Ashley Barnes being there as well. So I think that'll be the biggest. I think Justin's right. I just kind of see Warnock making it about man-to-man battles, and I think the thing that will worry me a bit is whether Hellick and Pearson just kind of in that battle with the bigger lads up top, which they should do. I mean, that's another thing I really like about us defence at the moment. I don't go into games thinking they're going to get bullied by anyone, because they're really strong themselves. They love a battle. And yeah, I'm going back to what I said earlier, Brady. I think Neil's got David's number. He knows what he's going to do. It's going to be 3-0 Town.
You've set yourself up for a
Huddling hat trick.
Huddling hat trick. Yeah, all in the last 10 minutes. Okay, well let's come on to the match predictions then. I'm going to jump in first because I'm feeling not as positive as you, Tom. I think we're going to be in this game, but I just think Jonathan Rowe is in the form of his life, like Justin was saying earlier, and I just think he's going to score. I'm going to go for another 1-1, I think. Correct prediction, first one of the season from yours truly, by the way. But yeah, I think 1-1. If we score first, I think if they score first, I think it's 2-1. But yeah, I'm going to go for 1-1, and I'm going to go for a man who's got a lot of criticism this season. Well, not this season, but last game. Daniel Carl Ward.
Carl, that is middle name.
Carl or not? I had this thing with James where he was. I corrected him, and I can't remember which one's right because he was chanting it, and I think it's. Someone I'm gonna have to. I'll Google it while you're talking. Tom, what's your match prediction?
I am. All right, maybe 3-0 was a bit crazy to think that, but I do think Town will win this game, and I think it'll be a 2-1 win. and I think the goals will be scored by Jonathan, Xavier Hogg, and let's go with you know what, he's got his chin up and he's looking a bit more exciting. Let's go for Sorba Thomas to get a goal.
Nice. It is Daniel Carl Ward. James was saying Daniel Mark Ward. I think at the cricket, which is even more confusing. So there you go. Justin, what's your prediction for this one?
I mean, if anyone tunes into the second tier, they will know that my predictions are utterly useless. There's no mistaking that. So it depends how you want me to side with this. If you want Huddersfield to win, then I'll predict a Norwich win.
Yeah,
because that's certainly where the head's lining up, isn't it? I mean, the logical choice is Norwich, but the Championship is illogical. I do fancy a win and a clean sheet for Huddersfield. Sorry, I think Lee Nichols will be man of the match because I think Norwich will pepper you with shots, and I think Gabriel. If Norwich are going to pick up a result, it's going to be from a Gabriel Sara worldy because that's what he's capable of doing. But I do fancy Huddersfield. I fancy Karoma to get on a score sheet, and I fancy a Matty Pearson from a set piece because I mean Sorba Thomas's delivery saw it cause problems for Middlesbrough at the weekend, albeit not quite scoring directly from a corner, but I would claim it if I was taking that. So yeah, I think he's going to cause issues and from his set pieces, and just Matty Pearson will head anything, won't he? So he's going to get on the end of one.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, I feel like you're buttering Town fans up here. It's probably because we're about to move on to the mailbag because it's extra time on this podcast. But yeah, Justin, I know you guys on the second tier got a lot of flack last season for telling us we were rubbish. We can say we're rubbish. You can't. But you'll be pleased to hear that our questions this week, everyone is, there's not a lot of criticism here. So I think you've done well. Maybe it's a new season. Maybe everyone's just chilled out a bit. Maybe you're not the thing we can get annoyed with. But maybe that will come late in the season. Who knows? We'll go with the first question, which is from Guy Bradley. He says, this is just one for everyone, really. I don't know why. We're a little light on questions as well. But he says, did Norwich know they were stitching us up with Alex Pritchard? The reason I wanted to bring this up is because he's doing really well at Sunderland. But I don't know how true this is, but this is what I was told at the time. Apparently, we were interested in Maddison, and it was 2 million more for him. And
I heard that as well, Brady.
Yeah, and we went with Alex Pritchard rather than James Maddison. And
I heard we actually went for both of them, but it was the Maddison price tag was just way too much for us at the time. But you kind of Prem money, innit? Prem money should have talked at that moment in time, really, to be honest.
It's a shame it didn't come 12 months later because you're just throwing money at about anyone.
When you look at how much bloody hell, Justin.
If you're going to throw money at signings, you throw it maybe not on Pritchard, but in hindsight, but he was a young up and coming player at that point. Obviously, Maddison, young up and coming player at that point. But then obviously there's this disaster signings of Mbenza and Diakabi, for example, to point to out. That was a rough couple of years window wise, and one you can look back and think maybe laugh or maybe not. I don't know where I'm not a Huddersfield fan, so I don't know whether I can or not.
I think I'm at the point of laughing now because it does feel a little bit away, but it's just like I swear we're the only team that like parachute payments meant nothing to us. Like every other team is like, but yeah, I don't know.
I've heard Pritchard. I don't know if this was just a rumor. So is he potentially leaving Sunderland?
I read a similar story. I think it would be daft, but they've got a lot of technical quality in that final third. And it seems to going with a younger group of players, but Pritchard's form last season was really, really good. It just depends whether or not he's worth the budget they're spending on him times the amount of minutes he's going to play this season. I think that's what it's going to come down to because they are a frugal club now. Sunderland are not going to have baggage, and they just signed Bradley Dack, who's a bit more versatile than Pritchard. So I won't be surprised if he leaves. Coincidentally, or sort of comically ironic, is he's the ideal player that Huddersfield probably need at the moment, but he's probably not going to return to the club anytime soon.
Probably not.
Oh no, I'd quite like that. We haven't had a good old Twitter meltdown in a while, to be fair. So no, I was just going to say the same thing, Justin. If you looked at that, if he hadn't played for us, you'd look at that and be like, oh, fringe player at a team that's challenging. Yeah. There we go. I got a lot more out of that than I was thinking as well. So thank you very much, boys. Josh Hellowell, this is specifically for you, Justin. He asks, could Justin explain why he hates the people of Huddersfield? However, could he give his view through the means of interpretive dance? Otherwise, I'm not interested.
It's a shame it's a podcast, isn't it? Because I would do it. That's the thing. I would do it.
He's doing it right now. He's doing it right now. It's incredible.
It is, yeah. I mean, maybe not through interpretive dance, maybe through comedy. I don't know. It's just too northern for me. That's what it is. I'm from the Midlands. So that's where the country stops, isn't it?
But Justin, you don't I know you get this a lot, but you don't actually hate Huddersfield. Because, I mean, you come on this podcast enough. You must clearly not hate Huddersfield.
Well, I might have my reserved judgments on you guys. No, just kidding. No, it's what it comes down to is it's clubs that are trending downwards. We naturally will criticise them, and therefore, I think if you support a football club that's being criticised on a weekly basis, you're going to assume you've got a certain dislike. I mean, we once disliked. I'm trying to think of a club now, not Luton. That's a bad example because they've been on an upward trajectory. But there are plenty of examples. You look at Birmingham City last season, who were a nightmare football club to comment on because they're an incredibly passionate fan base, Birmingham City fans. But the club was an absolute horror show. The ground was rubble. It was riddled with debt. Who's going to buy a football club like that? Thankfully, Tom Wagner's come in and bought the football club and it's on the up. And we're speaking positively about them. It's how the clubs are run compared to your form. That's what it's down to. If you're playing crap, we're going to say you're playing crap. And Huddersfield for 2/3 of last season played crap. Simple as that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I don't know though. Maybe it's something over at the second tier because I remember I wrote that article for you about World Cup squad. Euro squad. If you could only pick players from the Championship, and I remember a Watford fan basically sent me a death threat because I didn't put Will Hughes in the starting 11.
You muddied your reputation by joining the second tier for a cameo.
What reputation, Justin? What reputation? Which is probably a good time to end before I say something silly and do ruin that very, very small reputation. So we'll end it there. So thanks to Tom and Justin for coming on. Thanks to you, listener, for tuning in as always. And thanks to Magic Rock, who sponsors the podcast. As we touched on earlier, we will be back to preview the next game. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about first win of the season. Okay, and we'll leave it there. Ta for now and up the town.